NFLDraftBible.com. I'm your host, Chris Shanafelt, bringing you the names that you need to know first since 2002. That's what we do at the NFL Draft Bible, NFLDraftBible.com. And joining the show now is, he probably knows, if you're looking for information on FCS football, even Division II football, small school football in general, this is the guy you're going to want to go to. He is Brian McLaughlin of HeroSports.com. He's their senior FCS writer, and we've had him on the show in the past, and we're really excited to have him back on the show. Brian, how's everything going?
It's great, Chris. Big 3 are over, and now it's going to be interesting to see, how these guys are viewed coming out of all those interviews and, what they did on the field and then the important practices and all that stuff. So it'll be interesting to download all that.
Absolutely, and let's start it off right there, Brian. The All-Star game circuit is over. The big 3 games, the NFLPA game, the East-West Shrine game, and the Reese's Senior Bowl, as of this weekend, they're all history now. And let's start off with some of the big winners from those games. And let's start off right away with Kyle Lauletta, the quarterback out of Richmond. He was the Reese's Senior Bowl MVP after the game, after he threw a game-high 198 yards and 3 touchdowns in the not that it really matters, in the South team's 45-16 win over the North. He was on fire all week. It was a lot for you as it was for me, Brian, to see kind of the national media pick up on Kyle Lauletta, because this is a guy that has been wreaking havoc in the CAA for years. And in the past, he suffered a torn ACL, I believe, his junior year, and came back his senior year, and now here he was, MVP of the Senior Bowl. What do you like about Kyle Lauletta's game, and how do you think he'll transition to the pro game?
Yeah, well, as you and I discussed, I've gotten to know Kyle really well. I've covered him for years, obviously, covering the right after he finished his final exams, he actually called me up and said, "Hey, I got some time. Let's catch up." And I probably spent an hour or two on the phone with him, getting to know him. And the thing that jumps off the page, and I know it sounded like it did for you too, is when it comes to intangibles, I don't know that I've ever met a guy like him. And when I'm saying intangibles, I'm talking about kind of the off the field, the personality, the brain, what a cerebral quarterback this guy is. And from watching the NFL that those are the guys that really do well. It seems like a gee-duh thing to say, but it's the guys that can make 5 reads in 4 seconds. And Kyle, I think his greatest hobby is watching film, and then on top of that, he looks the part too, at 6'3", 220. So, you would never know, and this, and but maybe the people following know, you would never know that Kyle Lauletta was the Senior Bowl MVP if you ever talked to him. That's not the way he is, and that's something you see in a lot of FCS, but him more than anybody, you would never know. So he turns some heads physically. He's going to turn heads when he gets into interviews with teams, when he's flying all over the country. And, his draft stock is going to fly up as the next week or two come along. I guarantee you he's starting to look more like a day 2 guy than a day 3 guy, and I think he has a really bright future ahead of him.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Heading into the Senior Bowl, a lot of people were thinking, a day 3 guy, maybe round 6 or 7. I don't think there's any shot of that now.
Right.
He's listed, I believe, 6'2", 217, 6'2 and a half, so closer to 6'3". Decent size for the quarterback position. Then, like you said, once you're able to talk to this guy, we had him on the NFL Draft Bible Player Spotlight show a few weeks back. Obviously before the Senior Bowl, before a lot of the buzz came through, and then obviously throughout the Senior Bowl week as he was blowing it up. That interview gained a lot of attention, and this is a guy that a lot of people see as the perfect pick for the New England Patriots. Tom Brady, 40 years old, he's getting up there in age. Hey, but you don't want doubt Tom Brady and the Patriots just yet. But this is a guy that a lot of people are kind of connecting the dots to, saying he is the perfect New England Patriot and would fit in perfectly with their organization. And I don't know Kyle as well as you do, Brian, but the way he kind of carries himself, and like you said, I mean, if you're to speak to him today, you would have never known that he was the MVP of the Senior Bowl just this past weekend. That I can already tell. I mean, exactly what kind of player is he, and what kind of player will an NFL organization get come this spring?
Well, I know when we were looking at the draft list last summer and starting to about FCS guys who might have a shot, and Jeremiah Briscoe from Sam Houston State has come up for years because he was a big prospect coming out of high school. He nearly went to Arkansas with Bobby Petrino before that went down. Started at AB, and so people knew a little more about Briscoe. So it looked like Briscoe would be the quarterback coming out. And I'm not the biggest draft analyst. I'm a journalist. I'll rely on what the draft analysts do, and I'll compile it in an FCS format. And when we ran what it looked like scouts were saying about the FCS, it was like we had fans going at us. Where's Kyle Lauletta? And I said, I don't know, because I think the kid's great, but he's not getting a lot of looks for some reason. Well, that changed as the year went on. I mean, he started to catch more and more attention. It didn't make a whole lot of sense to me that he wasn't being paid attention to as much maybe a year ago when you saw him shred Virginia last year. Here he plays against the ACC team. He hangs 37 points on them and 4 touchdown passes. And, that is recruiting. But Kyle is finally really hitting his stride. I think toward the end of the year, people were starting to say day 3 type guy like you did. I think he's just, on top of being a really smart guy who, goes to bed reading the playbook, also got some pretty good wheels. So he's a mobile guy. And he has, you can even ask him. He brought it up to me tonight when we talked for a diary. Maybe I didn't have the strong arm there, but I think I have a strong enough arm to go along with all the other things I have going for me to make a good quarterback. And I think maybe he's not the biggest gunslinger in the group of 8 quarterbacks they had, this weekend, but obviously he did some things right. So, that's probably the way to break him down. He's just humble guy. He, wasn't highly recruited coming out of high school and really turning out to be kind of a dream come point.
And he's coming off of a season where he threw for over 3,200 yards, 26 touchdowns to only 9 interceptions. And like you said, if he has to, he'll make some plays with his feet as well. Again, only if he has to. Certainly, and I think I agree with you. I don't think he gets enough credit for it as good for being as good of an athlete as he is and as he's shown over the years. And lately, as of late, some really top-notch talent has come out of Richmond. Brian Brown, the wide receiver, a couple years back, the first to pop into my mind. Obviously, a former receiver of Lauletta's there at Richmond. Moving on, Brian, to the East-West Shrine game, and their offensive MVP was the wide receiver out of Northern Iowa, Doris Fountain, who, he had a huge week. I had the pleasure of actually being down there in St. Pete and seeing some of those practices live and seeing the game itself where he led with 3 receptions, 61 yards, and had a big punt return in that game as well. So he kind of showed that he was able to do it both on offense and on special teams. Again, he was the game's offensive MVP, and I don't even know if he really had to do anything in the game to get that award because of how impressive he was throughout the week of practice. What do you like about Fountain's game? And is there? Lauletta, you could throw him in the mix as well, but I don't know if there's anybody that has really helped their draft stock as much as Doris Fountain from UNI. I mean, this is a guy that wasn't on too many people's radar, and now, I mean, they're saying, hey, this might be the top small school wide receiver in this year's draft.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. You know, Kyle, I think, came into the All-Star games with a little bit of a budding reputation. Fountain, I mean, you know, again, but as far as an NFL draft prospect, I wasn't hearing a whole lot about him in the fall. So after the game, I did get a chance to catch up with him, and things that he told me. I mean, he's a big kid, as you know. I mean, he's a good target. This kid's not 5'9", you know, and he said when he was talking to scouts, like he talked to the Rams, and the Jags, and the Cardinals, and Carolina, Texans, you know, you name it. And a lot of them brought up David Johnson, just from the standpoint, you know, not the same position, obviously, but just from the standpoint of, you know, look at the talent that can come out of Northern Iowa and the Missouri Valley Conference. And so David up a lot. And Doris, I think he just, you know, he, once again, another example of an FCS guy getting in, you know, a game against SEC, ACC, Big Ten guys, and he belongs. And I'll tell you this, he was stoked to be talking about how the week went. He was excited. He was great on the record for a journal. You know, I think he's at least a day 3 guy. I don't know how you feel about it, Chris, but I think at this point he's definitely a draft pick. Yeah. You know, but you never know, I guess.
I don't think there's any doubt that he certainly proved his case. And as of right now, he does not have a combine invite, I do not believe. But I'm hearing, you know, come pro day, or even if he does receive an NFL combine invite, I mean, I'm hearing he's going to blow that up. He is a former track star there at UL. And,
right.
You know, so, I mean, this is a guy that can jump out of a gym. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what his 40 time is going to look like as well. And, you know, one last thing, and I can't believe, you know, neither you or I mentioned it on Luletta. You know, he was able to have the success that he did with 4 different offensive coordinators there at Richmond as well. So I definitely had to throw that nugget in there. And then, of course, he was able to do what he was able to do down in Mobile with, again, another coaching staff. Again, you know, a pretty vanilla playbook. But hey, nonetheless, still impressive. Was again the MVP there at the Reese Senior Bowl. So I think those are no doubt the 2 prospects that have, I guess you could say, made the most money in the All-Star circuit, and it just so happens they come from smaller schools in the FCS. How about the NFLPA Collegiate Bowl? Brian, I mean, off the top of my head, I'm not really sure. I mean, I know the was it a linebacker from Penn State that won the MVP award over there? But what about some of the smaller school prospects over there? I know, and we have him written down on one of the prospects that we'll be touching on in just a bit. Running back Martez Carter from Grambling.
Right.
You know, I know he impressed and looked like probably the best running back out there at the Rose Bowl that week. But was there any other small school prospects that kind of made some noise in LA the week of the NFLPA Bowl?
Well, I thought it was interesting that Jameel Denby, you know, out of Maine,
that's right,
came out of that game and immediately was invited to the Senior Bowl. You know, and I know that's totally allowable. You know, the more the merrier, I guess. But that was impressive for Jameel, and he definitely has the Maine crowd pretty stoked that he's heading. And you know, you brought up Martez Carter, and we did get to know Martez pretty well this past fall. Great game out in California. And it's so many times, as you know, the HBCU guys, you know, with Martez being out of Grambling, just like Devontae Kincaid, you know, those guys, they don't always get, you know, the credit that you might expect. And we saw that last year with Tariq Cohen. Once he got a chance, you know, he really proved himself. So it was nice to see Martez do well, because he's a great kid and had a great for Grambling as they won the SWAC, and he and Devontae were quite the duo, and I kind of think things will happen for them this spring as it goes along with their pro day, etc. And so, yeah.
And let's carry on right there. I mean, Devontae Kincaid, Martez Carter, they're two prospects I really like. They were very fun to watch this past season and throughout their career. Starting with Martez Carter, again, played in the NFLPA Bowl, came away, at least in my opinion, probably the best running back down there in LA that week. And actually, if I'm not mistaken, I believe he led the game in rushing. Not that that's saying too much in an all-star game, but he is a little smaller in stature. I believe 5'8", 5'9", 205 pounds. So at least he does have some weight on him, but there are a lot of comparisons to that Tariq Cohen, who was drafted by the Chicago Bears last year in the 5th round out of North Carolina A&T, so a fellow HBCU alum. What do you think about that comparison when it comes to Martez Carter? Is it lazy, or is that a legit comparison that you can understand?
No, I don't think it's lazy at all. I think there's that kind of potential there. A 3,000-yard career rusher at Grambling, but as we see with a lot of these skill guys, there's always helps a lot to be a good special teams player, which Martez is. He's a good return guy. As far as being able to catch the ball out of the, coming out of the backfield, he's proven he can do that as a nearly 1,000-yard career, receptions guy coming out of Grambling. So, he can hit you from a couple different angles, and I think that's what gets you that extra chance, to hang on there on a 53-man roster or improve your draft stock, along with what you do with your opportunities in the spring before the draft. So, Martez was not exactly a guy that again, kind of like Fountain, we weren't talking a whole lot about in the preseason last summer, but, it's kind of turned into, hey, maybe this guy could make it because he could be a kick returner or a punt returner, like a Jamal Agnew out of San Diego, who obviously did well for the Lions. So, I think that's the thing about Martez. He's a thick. He can hit, and he's hungry. He's hungry as hell, man. And that's what makes a lot of these guys succeed, I think. So it'll be fun to see.
And you hit it right on the head. I mean, with Carter, not only can he get it done on offense, but special teams as well. And, in the return game, even on offense, I mean, this is a guy that's a very reliable receiver as well. Like I said, nearly 1,000 yards there at Grambling over the past 3-4 years there. How about his quarterback, Devontae Kincaid? This is a guy that, again, very fun to watch this past season. A lot of people question, though, whether or not he can play the quarterback position at the pro level. I would hate to see him not get at least an opportunity, whether it's a tryout or, he does go on and get drafted or as of right now, I think he's looked at as probably a priority free agent, get into a camp somewhere. I'd like to see him at least get an opportunity, though, to kind of showcase what he has at the quarterback position before a team decides to turn him into a receiver or, a defensive back or whatever. Because this is a guy that, was highly recruited coming out of high school, first landed at Ole Miss, then transferred to Grambling State, where, he had a couple of really good years there at Grambling. This past season, 2,900 yards through the air, 23 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, 59% completion percentage. How do you kind of view Devontae Kincaid as a prospect?
I may be a little bit biased because I cover these guys, and I've talked to Devontae for a while now, and I just think he's got the it quality, like you said. Obviously, we had an SEC team that was willing to take a gamble on him, and 5 years ago I was recruiting for the Sporting News, and I talked to Devontae Kincaid all the time during recruiting. A lot of people wanted him, and Ole Miss was, red hot recruiting at that time, and they landed him, and, he's just a total playmaker. And, is he limited to being just a quarterback? I don't think he would be just, limited to quarterback if that doesn't quite work out. He might be the type of guy that could get a look doing something else, and it might keep him around in camp. So, but yeah, I think he'll be in a camp in May. I don't have any question he will be, and I think he'll be still there in August, and it'll just be a matter of what he does with the opportunity, like they all say. And but he's definitely talented enough to hang in there.
Hey, if there's something we know about Devontae Kincaid is that he is a playmaker. So no matter if he is at quarterback or if Destiny chooses him to play a different position at some point at the next level, I mean, you got to believe he's going to be making plays wherever he's at on the field. Again, whether it's at quarterback or a different position. Again, we're chatting with Brian McLaughlin, the senior FCS writer over at Hero Sports, herosports.com. Give him a follow on Twitter at Brian Mac Writer. And Brian, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about some of the prospects coming out of the state of Illinois. Starting with probably the two of the top prospects, I should say, coming out of the state, both coming from Illinois State, the Redbirds. And they're both coming from the defensive side of the ball as well, and that's cornerback Devontae Harris and defensive tackle Dalton Keene, who both participated in the East-West Shrine game a couple years ago in St. Pete, Florida. Both were on opposite teams, though, so that was pretty funny. That was pretty interesting to see, and both made a lot of noise throughout the week. We'll start with Devontae Harris, who's viewed as one of the top cornerback prospects in the entire country. A lot of people kind of have him mocked going in the 5th, 6th round. I think that's certainly possible. And this is a guy that for years and years in the Missouri Valley, quarterbacks wanted to stay away from, and now he's finally getting a shot to move on to the pro level.
Yeah, that's Devontae's somebody that I know we've been talking about since last summer. Keene, I think, has gone really strong since the season as far as reputation with scouts and all. Devontae, you said 5th, 6th round. That's generally what I see as day 3 respect. And, the Valley, and I've said this a million times on radio shows, the Valley to me is better than the group of 5 conferences when it comes to the quality of talent. I mean,
hands down.
I mean, it's good competition. When you're going against North Dakota State 2 years ago in the title game, and you're playing guys like Taron Christian and Dallas Goedert, and Carson Wentz 2 years ago, and Easton Stick this. It's the conference is tough and it's a challenge, and I think it is better than a lot of the group of 5 conferences collectively. So, and that Devontae's coming from this tiny little level is not really accurate. Just ask Northwestern from last year, when Illinois State knocked off, a Big Ten team. So it's good. It's a good competitive level and a very, very strong conference. And on top of that, they do challenge themselves outside of it. And I think these guys have a better college record than people really understand. And then it's really fun to see that translate to an all-star game when people go, "Oh, Illinois State, I don't know much about them." Well, you're about to find out.
Yeah.
And that's how it went.
And talent has come out of Illinois State for quite a few years now, and these two, Devontae Harris and Dalton Keene. I mean, I think Dalton Keene really had a great week down in Tampa, and I don't think enough people are talking about him. Rightfully so. PJ Hall of Sam Houston State.
PJ Hall.
Another defensive tackle, another nasty defensive lineman that was represented down in Tampa, Florida. Rightfully so. He's getting a lot of attention. Or Bilal Nichols of Delaware.
Yeah.
He got the call back up to the Senior Bowl just last week.
Right.
But Dalton Keene, I thought, had a really, really solid week. And, I know it's going to sound cliche, Brian, but you watch any of Dalton Keene's games, and I mean, you can't tell if it's the very first play or the very last play if you don't have the time clock there in the corner of the screen. I mean, this guy's motor is running nonstop.
Right. Yeah, that's the reports, you hear about him, and, we see, what's the average, 20 to 22 defensive ends taken, and, that leaves some room for a guy to slip in there, and he's got a lot of, look, I always look at the games as it opens doors. I mean, it's the same thing for pro days and in the obviously the combine, et cetera. It opens doors being invited to come, meet a team and then get to know you better. And Dalton opened doors, with what happened down here in my neck of the woods in Tampa. So. Thing you know, 5 teams might fly you in to get to know you for a couple of days, and you meet the coaches and everything. And I think that's what we're looking at with him. And he is definitely one of the 10 to 15 risers coming out of the FCS level. What you started off the conversation topic, which is the FCS guys that really did well in the All-Star game. That's one of the 10 guys probably that really just opened up some more doors.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I would agree with you on that, Brian. And how about, we are talking about some of the FCS prospects that helped themselves out big time in the All-Star game circuit. How about a couple leathernecks of Western Illinois who were left off of the All-Star game circuit? One on each side of the ball, linebacker Brett Taylor, who was a finalist for the Buck Buchanan Award given to the top defensive player in the FCS, and then wide receiver Jalen Acklin, who was one of the more impressive receivers in the country this season, coming from absolutely nowhere, at least in my eyes. I did not expect it at all. A senior who was seeing very limited time on the field prior 3 years at Western Illinois, and went on to have over 1,300 yards and 10 touchdowns this past season for the Leathernecks, and filling some pretty big shoes in Lance Lenore and Joey Borsellino, who went on to move on from the program, graduated from Western Illinois last year. I was really surprised they didn't get a look at any of these 3 games, specifically, the NFLPA or the Shrine. I really thought these 2 guys were going to get snatched up pretty quickly, but that just never seemed to happen. Why do you think that was? I mean, why do you think the All-Star games kind of veered away from the two Leathernecks coming out this year?
I don't have any idea. I don't understand it either, man. Okay, so we met with Brett at the national championship game when they had the banquet for Buchanan, for the Buchanan Award, and Coach Fisher. We got to hang out with Charlie. On Twitter, we as a collective staff at Hero Sports were screaming that very message, tagging the game, saying you're missing out on some monster talent. Couldn't this guy take the last spot? And when or both these guys, don't know that really. I always look at the All-Star games as, unless you do something really stupid like your behavior, it's hurt yourself really badly at a game, but you can sure help yourself. So I just think Brett and Jalen are gonna, they're just gonna have to prove it in different ways. I mean, the pro day, it sucks to have things come down to, one day like that, but it's good. That's probably going to be the way it is. And, I did have a chance to talk to Brett, in person, and, he was appreciative that we were pounding the message on his behalf, publicly. But these are 2 ballers. They're going to be in camp again. They're going to get a shot. It's just, how long is that shot going to last? How many opportunities in the camp will they get, before cuts come? And that's the sad reality, with the NFL when you're not a draft pick is, you'll probably get that. But that shot might only last a couple of weeks. Hopefully it lasts August, or, hopefully you can get a practice squad and make a spot and make $10,000 a week while you continue to try to impress. Those are the things. And I mean, I look at those 2 and think they're certainly that level. It's just a matter of whether they pick the right team to sign a free agent contract. And I don't know why they weren't invited to a game. I can't even begin to answer that question.
Yeah, it was again mind-boggling to say the least. I think the resumes, at least from this past season alone, spoke enough to at least being deservingly of the All-Star invite. And couple more guys that did not get a shot at an all-star game circuit from Eastern Illinois. Linebacker Nick Horn, safety Bradley Dewberry, who are also giving this pro football career thing a shot. And, I really like their chances at, getting into a camp as well at some point next year. And Eastern Illinois, they're going to be represented in the Super Bowl. Kamu Grugier-Hill, linebacker and special teams standout for the Philadelphia Eagles, was actually drafted by the New England Patriots. So, he has a little bit of history with them as well. This is a guy, and I always look back, whether it's, somebody from Eastern Illinois or somebody from a totally different school, and I always look back at what Kamu Grugier-Hill was able to do. Nobody was really talking about him. Scouts did show interest, and they showed up at practices throughout the season there at Eastern Illinois when he was attending there. But, nobody had any idea about Kamu Grugier-Hill until Pro Day. I was there in person at the Northwestern Pro Day, and, he put up some ridiculous numbers. And, that, and then team meeting with teams, and he was ultimately able to get drafted by the New England Patriots in the 6th round of the NFL draft. So, again, like you said, these All-Star game invites and being able to participate in them, they are a big plus, but I don't think it necessarily hurts any prospects if they don't get an invite and they don't participate in any of these events. Ultimately it will come down to, you will have an opportunity at a pro day to meet with some teams. And, like you said, it kind of sucks that so much is going to be relied on one day, but that's just how the process is going to be. Eastern Illinois, Nick Horn, Bradley Dewberry, overall thoughts on those guys as NFL prospects. And, I know you've been able to chat with them as well in the past.
I haven't heard as much about is some of these others, and I would throw Jacob Judd in there, from Western. And, I think when you're getting to the elite guys that everybody's going to get a shot. And I know that's kind of a vague response, but I think everybody's going to get at least a shot. And, I think other guys in the Valley might be slightly ahead of some of the ones mentioned, but they've got 3 months, and a lot of them are training. I know, that we got people in Denver, Atlanta, down here in IMG, in Bradenton, trying to get better, trying to, that 40-second time down 2/10 to turn heads. And the opportunity's in front of all these guys. It's just kind of a matter of what they do with it and what their peak is. And, that will start to put them on the charts, because, I haven't seen those guys consistently, near the top 30 or 40 FCS guys mentioned.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Kind of some sleepers as of right now, but hey, come Pro Day, those sleepers could certainly be awakened. A few more questions for you, a few more topics for you, Brian, then we'll let you go. Really do appreciate your time. Again, he's
Brian
McLaughlin, the senior writer over at HeroSports.com, does a great job covering the FCS. A must follow on Twitter at Brian McWriter. And, as you mentioned, the Missouri Valley is one of the top conferences in football. It doesn't matter if it doesn't even matter if you compare it to some of the conferences in the FBS. This will go head to head with those other conferences in there as well. Talking about another FCS team, a couple other FCS prospects coming from South Dakota State, and that is receiver Jake Weinecke and tight end Dallas Goddard. Weinecke entered the season being looked at as probably the top FCS receiver in the country, and you could still make that argument now. Wrapped up a fantastic career there, but and he did lead the team in touchdown receptions. But the leading receiver there this year, and everybody kind of expected it, was tight end Dallas Goddard. These two were some very impressive, very exciting weapons to watch, as the quarterback Taryn Christian was able to deliver to them and find them a number of times throughout the season. And Dallas Goddard, unfortunately, had a great first practice at the Senior Bowl, then went down with, I believe it was a ankle injury, calf injury. Don't quote me on that. how are you viewing these two guys, and what's it been like for you to watch them kind of dominate the Missouri Valley over the years?
Yeah, I mean, we've had a chance to get to know these guys, and I saw Jake also in Frisco. Got a chance to talk to him a little bit, as well as, by the way, had a good talk with him. Winicky, I don't know that you would say that Winicky had as good a season as junior. He just was lights out, and if you remember, he shredded TCU, and I mean last year his numbers weren't quite as good, and Dallas kind of went up, But both of them have been kind of at the top of the charts most of the past year when it comes to FCS prospects. Dallas has, once he started doing the one-handed thing if you remember that really got cranking early in the 2006. He was just amazing, and his highlight videos started becoming kind of legendary. And so Dallas was a quantity coming into this year, and now we're hearing the Gronkowski comparisons and all that kind of stuff. And he looks like, I mean, could he be a first rounder? I don't think he leaves the second round. I don't think it's any lower than the second round with him, and that would make him the number one guy in the FCS most likely, unless Brandon Parker from North Carolina A&T starts to shoot a little more. And then Winicky looks like maybe a fourth rounder, fifth rounder, maybe a third rounder, I guess, depending on how the rest of the year goes. So, those are some pretty good players, And then, Chris Streveler, look what he started out, played a lot there, and then he transferred to South Dakota, and this year he just was insanely critical in what South Dakota did and turning their season around and becoming a playoff team and going a couple rounds. And his highlight film, I know when we were watching it in Frisco at the banquet, just drew oohs and ahs from, there were some pretty big names in that banquet like Jerry Rice and Everson Walls, and everybody's eyes were kind of popping out at, some of the things Streveler did. So, some really good talent coming out of the Dakotas, and you throw the North Dakota State guys in there, it makes it even crazier. So, yeah, it's a loaded conference, as we said earlier, and the South Dakota State guys kind of lead the pack. And I think Taryn Kristen, the quarterback, will be somebody we talk about next year. He's very, very good. So, a lot of talent up there.
No doubt about it, and I totally agree with you on Chris Streveler. We'll actually be chatting with him tomorrow, so be sure you guys stay tuned for that. You know what? I'm curious. I mean, who got your vote for the Walter Payton Award? I mean, not to discredit anything Jeremiah Briscoe has been able to do, in the past, and again, he was a back-to-back winner, won it again this year. But if I had to vote, Brian, I would have voted for Chris Streveler, the quarterback out of South Dakota.
Yeah. Yeah, well, the company that does the voting, I don't know if it's an oversight or they look at us as competition or whatever, so I don't have a vote.
Okay.
And I agree completely with you. I voted for Streveler at 1, and probably Briscoe too. Briscoe is incredible. Is going to make an NFL team next year. He's very good. Very good background. And the number 3 guy was Keelan Doss, who's a junior, who will probably be the best FCS prospect next year out of UC Davis, with Dan Hawkins coaching. So those were the 3 guys that were there. My votes would have been Streveler for Buchanan and Brett Taylor. Even though Streveler for Peyton, Brett Taylor out of Western Illinois for Buchanan, but Darius Jackson out of Jacksonville State got that award, which Darius is very good too and a big prospect. So tough calls. I mean, Briscoe winning it doesn't blow you away. Guy threw for like 5,000 yards and touchdowns. Yeah. It's just the competition is not on the level of the Valley, and Streveler did almost the same type numbers against Valley competition, and that's. That would have been that was kind of my same argument with, look what Western Illinois is going against. And so that would have been my vote if I had a vote, Chris.
Okay.
So,
and
there you go.
I like it. I completely agree with you. And, before we finish this, draft conversation, Brian, let me ask you, We touched on a lot of prospects, some that have gotten a lot of national attention and some that have not. If you could bring up one name that as of right now is still a sleeper that not too many people know about, and just a small schooler in general. Doesn't necessarily need to be an FCS prospect unless you'd like for it to be. Of course, it could be somebody in the Division II ranks, Division III ranks, or even the NAIA ranks. You tell us, Brian. I mean, who, as of right now, what is it, January 29th, who, as of right now, is still a sleeper that people need to wake up on?
Obviously I can think of a couple, but I'll tell you what, I'll throw a name out there. Donovan Alumba State. Portland State out of the Big Sky, has had some pretty good DB play the last couple of years, and Donovan's a corner. And a lot of corners get picked up, and I think I've seen late day 3 type stuff on Donovan. He didn't get invited to any of the big games, which I was a little surprised by, so it may come down to a day situation for him. But we see amazing kids come out of pro days, especially skill kids, just proving their speed, and they ended up getting picked up. So that's how Jamal Agnew got it done. So I really like his attitude. I mean, he's a great kid. He's happy to be here and getting this opportunity. And it reminds me last year. I think Xavier Coleman out of Portland State. It was kind of type of story, so I'd say Donovan Alumba out of Portland State. Keep an eye on him.
Okay, I like it. And finally, before we let you go, Brian, here is a question we received from Twitter. Javon Alford at Javon10. He asks, Brian, what teams do you believe will be next year's Austin Peay and Kennesaw State? I mean, some teams that really came out of nowhere, and again, Austin Peay just missing out on the FCS playoffs. Many thought that they should have gotten in, including myself. I really would have loved to see them get an opportunity. And Kennesaw State, we all seen what they were able to do, the run that they were able to make in the FCS playoffs. Who are some teams that you see really kind of catching some people off guard come next year?
Yeah, that's a great question. First off, Austin's going to sneak up on any, and they are loaded coming back. Kennesaw also will not sneak up on anybody, and they are really, really loaded. And I think they could be a Final Four team. I see less than a quarterfinal team. As far as kind of new blood, I'm going to say that the surprises in 2018, I think, are coming out of the Big Sky. Now, nobody's going to be surprised by the Montana Bulls getting better. They're going to get better. Nobody's going to be surprised when Montana State win. And I think they're going to win this year. But I brought up Keelan Doss from UC Davis. They have almost everybody back. And if you remember, early in the year, Cal Davis was kind of on the radar. They had had some good performances and been pretty impressive, and people were kind of talking about them. And then at the end of the season, they lost some close games. They finished 5-6. You flip 2 of their close losses, and they're a playoff team. Keelan's going to be arguably the best FCS prospect next year. He's 6'4". We met with him in Frisco, and he is just an awesome kid. And he was telling me about how they have 18 or 19 starters coming back. So I'm going to go with Cal Davis under former Boise State and Colorado coach Dan Hawkins, who has come back and kind of began to turn around there. Keep an eye on them this year as being maybe that team you weren't expecting, and let's see what they do, because I don't see them less than a 7-8 win team, and maybe even way better than that, possibly. And I definitely think they'll make the playoffs, and that's not something we've said a million times about Cal Davis.
Right, and as you mentioned, Keelan Doss, the wide receiver from UC Davis, is going to be the one to keep an eye on over there. And, Brian, that'll do it for us tonight. Really appreciate you jumping on with us. Had a lot of fun with this conversation. Again, keep up the great work over at herosports.com. And, again, on Twitter, at Brian McWriter. Any final words before we let you go, Brian?
Just looking forward to the next 3 weeks. One thing we're going to really try to do that nobody else does, especially not at the level that I covered with the FCS, but really overall, is we're going to try to create what I'd call a mythical combine using all pro day results, and we're gonna track down everything and throw it into a database. So you can see which FCS guy ran the fastest 40. It's going to take some networking, but we're looking forward to it. And we have, good stories coming for every day about guys getting chances by taking advantage of their opportunities, at pro day. So that's something we'll be doing that I don't think it's really ever been done before. It'll be fun.
Awesome. Well, again, really appreciate your time, Brian, and keep up the great work over there at herosports.com. I know the grind never stops for you guys over there. And again, a must follow on Twitter, especially if you're a fan of FCS football. You got to get on Brian McWriter on Twitter. Thanks a lot, Brian.
All right. Thanks, Chris. Love doing it.